Alrighty, we're rolling.
We're rolling.
Yeah, feel free to move these at any point.
For sure.
Like if you talk like this, obviously nothing, but right here, pretty solid.
Exactly.
Yep. But yeah, if you just want to introduce yourself, I guess to start out, man.
Yeah, first off, my name is Matt Woodworth. I am a CSU student going into my junior year after the summer ends, and I'm studying ecosystem science and sustainability with a minor in watershed science. So, yeah.
What's Watershed like? What is that about?
Watershed's interesting. So it's like anything to do with rivers, lakes, any body of water from small things like lakes and rivers to oceans.
Yeah.
A watershed is essentially any place where water will collect to one given point. So in Fort Collins, we have the Poudre River, and anything on that side of the divide will head east and will travel along the Poudre River, and anything in the Poudre River watershed will always accumulate in the Poudre River.
Okay.
So it's just a way of kind of finding the origin of where water came from. So if you have a river and you have a drainage pattern on the mountains, you can kind of find where landslides will happen, find where rock slides, where mudslides, where if there's a fire, what is the risk of having a bunch of water flow through an area.
Okay.
So
And that's very present with the fire we had within the last couple of years up in the Poudre Canyon.
Definitely, yeah. The Cameron Peak fire, largest one in Colorado history. Definitely, we're seeing some issues with like water quality and runoff and landslides, and it's rough. But I mean, that's why we have people out in the field doing that research.
It was the largest in Colorado history?
Largest in Colorado history, at about 208, I believe. Don't quote me on that. 208,000 acres.
Really?
The sad thing is, the one in New Mexico right now, about like 500,000 acres.
Okay.
It's huge.
So we got a little lucky.
So yeah, we got lucky with it, but it's just kind of it's the future. We're gonna have to be prepared for anything. So
What do you think about that, like fire mitigation and fire prevention and stuff like that? Do you have a thought on that?
It's very contradictory and controversial, but I'm for fire mitigation, but allowing it to like doing prescribed burns. Fire is supposed to happen, but what we're seeing is that we have a bunch of beetle kill, we have a bunch of drought going on as well, killing these trees, and so we have fresh timber ready to be burnt at all times in the mountains. So kind of mitigating that by spreading out some of the trees, clearing all the debris on the ground, allowing a fire to come through but not be as like powerful and intense as it's been in the last few years. Because I mean, 2002 through now, 10 years or 20 years, we have seen a rapid increase and size increase with all these fires, and it's not good.
Yeah. And weirdly enough, that's probably because we've prevented so many, in a sense, right?
Yeah, and I've heard that as well. I think of it like there's no right answer to any of this. We're trying to do our best in preventing them, but I think the problem is if we didn't clear it out, we'd have too much underbrush, and we're left with an even more intense fire. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a hard one to call whether fire mitigation is actually helping or not. But I guess that's what researchers will have to look more into and see if it's actually worth doing in the future.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because you would think just prevent it and it'll be fine, but if anything, you kind of just stack up more and more dead wood for long-term, bigger fires.
Exactly.
And so at some point you have to have fires, but do you think it's better practice to maybe like have subplots of land that we would let go on fire, if anything, like set on fire, or more clearing out forests would be a better case?
Prescribed fires are better. Yeah. So having a set plot of land that you can burn that, would be intense, but it'd be controlled. Yeah. I think is better than clearing out, because it's a lot less work to have to deal with that. Though, then again, bring it back to the water issue, we have to think about how that will impact the watershed. But either way, if a big fire comes through, that's going to impact it. So kind of doing prescribed fire burns every once in a while is very key to kind of figuring this
How
out.
does it impact the water when a fire goes through?
The chemical process of burning wood actually, so ash is very basic versus acidic. So it is hydrophobic, meaning if you have an inch layer of ash, which we kind of saw with the Cameron Peak fire, inch to 2 inches of ash on the ground, it is hydrophobic, so water just runs right over it. So there's no like seepage into the ground, and so you're left with even drier ground, and then it also washes away all that ash, and it just water quality goes down because it's filled with all this muddy, murky ash, and since you don't have that seepage, you have flash floods in later years because the soil is basic, and it has been burnt to a crisp enough to where water just goes right over it.
Gotcha.
As if it's not like a sponge anymore. It's like running water over a plate.
Yeah.
It just will go right.
Is there a worry of like the pH balance of water streams and stuff like that?
Absolutely, yeah. So with a lot of stream gauges, we're looking at pH turbidity, which is how much like sediment, how cloudy the water is, how opaque it is. We look at oxygen content levels, other dissolved gases, nitrogen. We're looking for organic matter like phosphorus and different chlorates and stuff. But yeah, definitely after a fire, we're going to see basic versus acidic, but we're going to see it be more basic. I don't know what that is on 1 through 7.
Yeah.
I think it's lower numbers.
Are streams normally acidic? Or
streams should be more neutral.
neutral?
I would say neutral, leaning on the side of maybe a little bit more acidic.
Really?
Because they pick up, carbon and chemicals along the way, and even through the air. If you have rapids, that's going to pick up a lot of the air and dissolve it into the water.
And does that make it more acidic?
If it's carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide being dissolved into water creates carbonic acid, which isn't very acidic. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to hurt anything. But just it runs more on the acidic side, I would say, at least in mountain streams. In lower streams down the line or slow moving like Amazon River, I'm not entirely sure what that would be. But
and that's from the aeration, basically?
Yep, from aeration, from just, these things are moving over a bunch of rocks, and, water can pretty much dissolve anything on this planet if it gives it enough time, or if it's hot, or so cold water will hold more dissolved oxygen and or other different gases and stuff, and so if you have a cold mountain stream, it's going to try to dissolve all of this oxygen and carbon dioxide and even just carbon in the rocks into the water itself. So,
does the watersheds ever get into like Colorado water laws in general?
Absolutely, yeah.
'Cause that's a big thing around here,
there's
right?
a huge thing about that because, the Rockies are where, most of the plains get their water, as well as 90% of the West get their water from the Rockies. So if we're using too much of that, there's laws in place in Arizona and Utah saying we can't use that much because they have access to that water as well. And so then there's the whole issue with dams and like who has jurisdiction over a river that spans thousands of miles. It's always hard. But we're seeing big impacts with that, with the Colorado River on the western slopes. Doesn't reach the ocean. It makes it to Los Angeles, a little bit further south. It should empty into like Baja California. It doesn't. It just dries up. So we're just, in general, the West is using too much water. So,
and that's where you see those California droughts come from. That's like a big cause, is the Colorado not reaching the ocean. Is that
Yes,
kind of a
yes,
good rule
yeah.
of thumb?
Colorado River does not reach the ocean currently,
Okay.
which is disappointing.
Yeah.
Like a river should always reach the ocean, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
So,
I guess
yeah.
being up here, thinking about it, I have to count myself lucky because
Oh yeah,
you don't have to worry about it necessarily up here because it starts with us.
exactly. Like,
And I wonder what percentage of the U.S. water, like just in general U.S., starts at Colorado or in the Rocky Mountains, you could even think, right?
I would say a majority.
Yeah.
I mean, so these watersheds, it's really cool. So, the Continental Divide.
Yep.
Well, we have, Poudre, we have the Platte River, we have the Arkansas River. All of those will end up draining to the eastern side of Colorado and drain up to, like, for example, Poudre River will enter the Platte River, then the Platte River will go to Missouri, the Missouri River into the Mississippi River, and it enters into the ocean. So all of these rivers are tributaries to a greater watershed, and the Colorado River on the western side. But I would say, there's a bunch of rivers that originate on the eastern side of Colorado and travel to the Mississippi, but then you have all the rivers coming from the Appalachian Mountains out east that end up draining into the Mississippi River as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Is there any thought of what to do with the droughts? Of like where to get, because everybody says consume less, but I don't think that's necessarily going to work, right?
it really is consume less, but not in the sense that drinking water, like we need drinking water.
Yeah.
So like consume a reasonable amount of water. It's more the landscaping. It's cosmetics. It's
grass.
It's grass and stuff.
Yeah.
People out west should not have lawns, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It should be xeriscaped. It should have rocks and native plants, cacti, drought-resistant plants. But if your yard is, filled up with a bunch of grass and it's just a lawn, like, I don't know. I know some people like lawns, but, in Colorado, you can just go to the mountains, get the grass,
Yeah.
But at your house, I don't see the point of it, and it's really causing a struggle out west.
Yeah. Do you think it's alternative to drought resistant you could do instead, like gardens?
Absolutely.
Like because I always thought about that. I was like, how much more food could we produce if we had like a incentive program for people to do their own gardens?
Absolutely.
Instead of their lawns?
Because then it would use water, but for a reason.
Yeah.
The reason for grass is to make it look pretty and green.
Yeah.
But like, if we had some, sustenance from the
Yeah.
food that we can grow in our garden,
There's a product from
yeah,
it.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's a very sustainable way of doing
Yeah,
things. And
yeah.
I agree with that.
Do you have any idea if farm agriculture, as in animals, use up more water and would cause more droughts, or more plant agriculture? Like, I guess plants versus animals, which one is really like...
I would say just in general, it's more sustainable to do plants.
Okay.
Only because it's not the animals themselves, it's that we are putting all this water and energy into food that we give them, and then we eat them.
Okay.
So if we just cut out the middleman and not have them eat, like don't do big animal agriculture and just do plants,
Okay.
That definitely would increase the chances of being less in a water crisis.
Yeah.
But that's far
That's a
far
harder
from,
topic to tackle.
It's a harder topic to tackle, especially like I eat meat. I'm not a vegetarian. I would like to try at some point. Just as a sustainability major, I would like to do my part. But I've been slowly but surely cutting out meat every once in a while,
Yeah.
and I've probably cut out 75% of my red meat
Yeah.
consumption, which is
Yeah.
good.
I just had Jacob, I don't want to get his last name wrong, I think it's Vanderroast, on last week.
Definitely.
And he had a short TED Talk on something similar to that, which is changing your diet to help with sustainability.
Absolutely.
And
It really does help.
yeah, I think he's getting his doctorate right now at CSU.
Definitely.
He said, and I hope I'm not getting that wrong too. But he was talking about how just do a meal a day without meat, and then maybe a day a week without meat,
Absolutely,
and then slowly
yeah.
scale that up and stuff like that was his whole thing. And we had him on last week, which was cool to see his perspective and everything like
yeah.
that. In my head, though, water comes in. I guess it is feeding the grasses that the cows eat, but then the cows also drink that. But then any water your body ingests, i.e. a cow's body, would be peed out.
Mhm.
So then it's filtering back into the stream, I would imagine, right? And this is my head thinking of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
When it comes into a plant, the plant takes it in, and I don't imagine plants peeing, so to speak, without a lack of a better
No, yeah,
term, right?
yeah, yeah.
So in my head, I would picture animals being less a problem because they filter that back out as a liquid,
Definitely.
right?
Yeah. And you have a point there. I think, well, I remember this diagram from a class I took, and it's like the amount of water used to, create fabric, to create clothing, is like, I'm gonna get this number wrong, but it was like 1 pound of cotton equals 7,000 gallons of water or something like that.
Yeah.
It was just a chart of a bunch of different water usages. And agriculture was one of the higher ones, just because, corn or I don't know what else they do, grass, but
Yeah.
they feed that to the cows, and that's a really water intensive product to get. But you have a point, though. If it does
Yeah.
filter back into the water system,
'Cause, like, if
I
some-
think it
sorry.
does get lost, though, obviously in their tissues, and through perspiration, through just evaporation. So I would say most of it doesn't make it back to the stream,
Okay.
even if they do pee.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I'm not entirely sure on that.
Yeah.
You have a good point.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because but then there's also I hear another counter argument in my head of the product you get from beef per se is a
Mhm.
lot more calorically and nutritionally dense than a plant, most
Yes.
plants at least. And so therefore, while maybe they're taking more water up,
They're taking
pound
up-
for pound, the product is yielding more nutrition and caloric
Absolutely.
benefit to somebody. So then there's that. I imagine that counter argument as well,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah. There's 1,000,001 counter arguments you can have. Yeah. I don't know what my stand is. I'm trying to. It's more expensive, but later on, I would like to, get beef from a local source.
Mhm.
Get it from a farm raised, just local economy. You can help them out, and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you do that rather than supporting the big corporations, it goes a long way.
Yeah.
And you can still have
Yeah.
meat.
And I think the easy one is grasses.
Definitely.
That's a very
Oh, yeah.
easy one to tackle.
Easy one,
The
just
beef
to-
is a little harder to knock out because there's a little more
Definitely.
nuance that needs to be had there.
Absolutely. Yep.
But all the I appreciate a really nice grass lawn and from a beautiful building. It adds
Absolutely.
that architecture.
Yep.
But I feel like we could just have a nice pivot from grass to some other. I'm not any plant specialist, but some sort of plant being used to just be still maintain the aesthetics,
Mhm.
but at the same time, then at least the water that's being used is presenting something that we can derive product from, right?
Definitely. Yep.
And I bet maybe there's a little more problems there with pests and rodents and stuff like that, but I feel like we already have that
could
with
be tackled
grass,
later on.
right?
Yeah, that could be tackled as a separate issue. But
Yeah.
I
To
think,
me, the grass is
yeah.
an easy problem to tackle.
Oh, yeah.
Just pivoting away from that, right?
definitely.
And back in World War II, they had victory gardens. Do you know about that?
I'm not sure. No,
I believe
not
it was
familiar.
It was one of the wars. I believe it was World War II. It was a victory garden because they needed to increase product yield for the war,
Mhm.
and so people would have what was called victory gardens in everybody's backyard or on their plot of land to produce food to help put
Mhm.
forward towards the war effort. And so it's kind of a collective. I don't know how like statistics of how many households got
Mhm.
behind it or what the actual yield was, but the term victory garden comes from that
Absolutely,
of
yeah.
households trying to at least attempting to produce their own food
Mhm.
to help kind of increase the product yield within the U.S. to help win the war. That's the victory part of it. And so
Absolutely, yeah.
we've already had that thought. You know, I wonder. I haven't, I guess, researched it heavily. I just know the phrase and the word, but it'd be interesting to see how many households got behind it and what the product yield was. It's a little different because that's what 60 years ago or something
Mhm.
like that, 3 decades or no 6 decades, but it'd still be interesting. And I don't know, instead of it just being grass that you cut, maybe that hour you spend each week cutting your grass, it's just maintaining the plants, and then you have an actual salad that night. And like, yeah, might take a little more time, but then the yield afterwards.
Exactly. A little bit more work to put in, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
okay. We can handle it.
yeah. Are there other ways to tackle drought? Like, to me, when you tell people to stop doing things, it's a lot harder than adding something, right?
Oh yeah.
It's a lot harder to have somebody subtract something from their life they're already used for than to maybe add it and it
Definitely.
doesn't even affect them. So is there anything like that out there with droughts that you
Not
know
that
of?
I know of.
Okay.
It really is simply just stop consuming as much,
Mhm.
and that's really hard to tell somebody stop doing this, like you
Yeah.
said, versus do this instead. Um, so I usually just phrase it in a way that's more positive, like.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I try to take as short as showers as possible
Mhm.
and just conserve water through brushing my teeth or, um, yeah, really anything like that.
Mhm.
Very minor things that you can do in the day that will cut back on a few gallons, but if everybody does that, collective action, everybody in the world sacrifices a little, a big sacrifice will be made,
Yeah.
rather than individuals making huge sacrifices and not having as
Yeah.
good of a life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not entirely sure if there would be another kind of way to tackle drought other
Mhm.
than just consume less. And I mean, obviously part of it is global warming, changing climate. It is getting hotter in the west and drier.
Mm.
It is getting wetter in some places and more intense storms. So
Where's it getting wetter? Do you know?
uh,
Do you have any examples?
I would say, in the sense that they're getting more storms, the East. East Coast is getting
Yeah.
massive storms, massive hurricanes. It's more humid, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
But also, it's I'm only 20, so I haven't seen a full progression of what climate change could do.
Yeah.
But I really am seeing like impacts to the world based on climate change. So.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I would wonder if, like, being California being so close to the ocean,
Uh-huh.
what, I don't know, pulling water from the ocean would look like for them.
Well, yeah,
Having that
I mean,
resource, right?
desalinization plants, they're a
Yeah.
thing. They're just really cost intensive.
Okay.
And energy intensive. So we would be sacrificing energy and, we would still have to burn coal and
Yeah.
oil, gas
Yeah.
to get that to happen. As well as, it costs it's a multi-billion dollar project. But I mean, we've seen it happen in Saudi Arabia. I know they have some desalinization plants in China. I think there's one or two in South Africa. So we could make it happen in California, but it's a long way to come, at least. But I agree. That would be a really good technology and infrastructure to add if we had a combination of solar and wind infrastructure to kind of carry it,
Yeah.
rather than oil and gas.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's going away. So
What do you think of nuclear?
I like nuclear.
Yeah.
I think the biggest issue we have with it is waste. Where do we put the used up nuclear waste? And we're finding solutions to that. Putting it deep, deep, deep into the ground does not have any contact with any biosphere, so there's no life being impacted. And we place it far away from any fault lines, any issues with earthquakes would not happen. there's always going to be accidents. There's always going to be issues with that. But as long as we can figure out a safe, secure place to put all this waste,
Yeah.
I like nuclear.
Yeah.
All those big smokestacks, it's not smoke. It is water vapor.
Yeah.
It is just cooling towers to cool down this hot liquid moving through the system.
Yeah.
So we don't have to worry about too much global warming impacts from nuclear energy. It's more the waste.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, the accidents that happen are a fraction of a percent of the nuclear power plants in the United States,
Mhm.
even the world.
Yeah.
So yes, there are accidents that do happen, but we're getting better and better and better at safely and securing the process.
Yeah, yeah, and it's usually with infrastructure that's so old
Mhm.
that it's almost surprising that it was still around. The big ones
Exactly. Yep.
come to mind of like people look back at it in retrospect and
Mhm.
like, why was this plant even going with what
Exactly.
technology we have now and the out of date technology they were using?
Exactly.
And it's like
Exactly.
if we just allow or have a nice light touch of regulation of keep things in check and like let's just make sure these things don't explode on us, right? There's an easy
Yeah.
argument just to keep those nice and safe.
Constant
right?
maintenance is key
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
Just somebody check up on it every once in a while and everything will be okay.
Yeah.
It's when people don't do their job
Mhm.
and let things get further than they should
Mhm.
is when we have problems.
And cut it for the
Yeah.
profit, right?
Mhm.
Because getting new computers or whatever it takes, new infrastructure
expensive.
is a little expensive, but having a whole blowout is a lot
Exactly.
bigger of a problem than
The cleanup,
your
the
margins,
radioactive decay, it's
Yeah.
nasty.
Yeah.
It's not good. And we're still seeing effects
Yeah.
of it from Chernobyl. We're seeing it from Fukushima.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a book I need to read called Apocalypse Never. It's somebody's critique of somewhat of the climate crisis,
Mhm.
but also advocates for nuclear.
Definitely.
And I watched an interview with the author. I forget his name, so I don't want to get it wrong. And I don't want to get the statistic wrong, but the yield per like barrel of waste he was saying per what energy you get from it is astronomical. I don't want to get it wrong, but the ratio he
Mhm.
gave, I want to make sure that it's well backed up. But what I've heard is really good about nuclear, I guess.
Definitely.
And I don't know, it gets a bad rap, I think, in the general populace with the accidents like we talked about.
It's because they only, publicize the accidents that happen and try to make it seem like it's worse than it is. But,
Yeah.
We have hundreds of power plants and only a fraction of them have ever failed. And it's because people didn't do their job.
Yeah.
The infrastructure was too old and there weren't, regular checkups on it. So
Yeah.
if we change that, we're in for, a good future in terms of nuclear energy.
Yeah, a bit of a tangent, but what do you think about that? The overpopularization of some topics in the media, how they kind of make things more dramatic than it actually seems, and it seems like it's ramping up lately, right?
Mhm.
Do you have any thoughts to that?
My thoughts would be, I don't know. I don't like to get into politics
Yeah.
or, news in general,
Mhm.
but I would say they're just doing their job. They're trying to get a good story. I get it, but also I think they should always have more of a neutral opinion on it. Just tell me the facts.
Yeah.
Tell me what happened and why, not all these opinions. I don't know. I'm giving my opinion right now, but I just think it gets people more riled up rather than giving them the information they need to kind of be safe or to be knowledgeable or any of that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, to me, there's a big difference between us sitting here and having a conversation and a whole news infrastructure making something seem like it happens 50% of the time when it's actually 0.5% of the time, right?
Yep.
And it, I think I've talked about this before, but it's just makes me very sad because to me it's a sign of decay in our institutions.
Mhm.
Because to me they're not doing their job. They think they are in the sense that it's a good story, quote unquote, but actually it's starting to divulge far from real journalism. And I think it's on both sides
Mhm.
where you could throw a stone at either side and get almost a similar answer of like the decay, so to speak, not to
Mhm.
get too into things, right? But to me, it's everywhere. And if you're somebody on the other side pointing the finger towards the other, there's still something on the other side
It's
to
still causing a
say.
problem.
Yeah.
It's still, yeah.
Yeah.
There's always something to say.
Yeah.
And yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. So, but there was, I have a lot of interest.
Mhm.
I have a list in my head of things that I would love to go back to school for, but
Absolutely.
just don't have time for. One is Colorado water law.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, I grew up here, but then also it's very complex and
Oh, yeah.
means a lot because, like you said, we trickle down to the western and eastern slope and are the start of a lot of water.
Other states rely
Yeah.
on us.
So do you have any insights with Colorado water law? Like, I have no idea.
Not too
of it.
much, actually. I will be taking a few more classes about that, but I haven't really delved into those quite yet.
Okay.
I'm excited for that,
Yeah,
though.
yeah. That's one of the classes where I was like, I'm just so interested because
Yeah.
there's just so many specific
Mhm.
regulations, and I kind of came from more of a rural community,
Yeah.
so I got a little bit of the taste of, I don't know. I got a hint of the idea of like don't use too much water, but then
Mhm.
there's also different chamber systems or something like that
Yeah.
to give water to the next ranches down the line and stuff like that. So it's all really interesting to me because like nobody owns the water, so to speak, but we've had to develop a system around
Mhm.
how much water goes to who. And it's funny because it's like it feels like there's infinite water, but there's not infinite water at this given time,
Nope.
right?
Exactly.
Like there's tons of water in the world, especially if you count the ocean, but to be using it seasonally, you have to dole it out in a regulation sense to
Mhm.
people, right? So that's always very interested me because it's to me
You
water is
ration, yep.
infinite, right? Because there's so much of it,
Exactly.
but we're dealing with something infinite in the time span of finite, so to speak. And so, yeah, that really, I don't know, interests me. So those classes sound interesting. I kind of
Absolutely,
envy
yeah.
you a little bit.
Oh,
but
definitely, yeah. I'm excited. I mean, I don't know if I want to go into something like law, but it piques my interest for
Yeah.
sure. And I would like to kind of step my foot into the door into more of those, getting the systems out there to change these laws.
Yeah.
Because it has to start from somewhere, and
Yeah.
that's where it starts, is
Yeah.
kind of changing the system.
Other than not having enough water,
Mhm.
what do you think is a big issue within watershed within Colorado
Uh,
or the U.S.?
In the U.S., probably large corporate companies using power and money to use a body of water to spill their excess waste
Mhm.
into these rivers and stuff. But there's not. They can kind of get out of the regulations that they're supposed to
Yeah.
follow.
Yeah.
So one problem with effluent, which is the water that they release into the rivers and eventually into the oceans, coming from nuclear power plants, that's an issue. But also just even natural gas or any of these big power plants, all of this water coming out is very hot. And remember what I said earlier: cold water can hold on to more oxygen. So imagine this fish swimming through this river, comes upon this stream of effluent coming from a factory. That water is warmer, doesn't hold as much oxygen, and so this fish can go from high oxygen content and a good temperature for them to survive in to something that's like not survivable
Yeah.
whatsoever for 10 seconds, and they could die or be damaged. So that's one issue. Wildlife, just from the effluent in rivers. What else is a big one? It really is just not in Colorado because we have snow melt, so it's really fresh, really clean. But a little bit further downstream, you have the accumulation of a bunch of, runoff and waste from farmland, and nitrates and whatnot are in the water. Any organic compound like nitrates from like fertilizers and stuff will increase the plant life, increase the algae that's in a body of water. sounds good, right?
Yeah.
Having a bunch of, life and plants and green. But it's not always good at the scale that it usually happens. You have these algal blooms, and it takes away all the oxygen because
Yeah.
they're using all of it.
Yeah.
Or, what else is there?
What does an influx in algae do to an ecosystem? Do you know?
Well, you have two types of lakes and
Okay.
bodies of water. You have oligotrophic and eutrophic. Eutrophic are going to be the ones that are green. They have a lot of life. They have, fish and wildlife. And then if you've ever been up to the mountains and seen like alpine lakes, they're usually just rocky, kind of blue. They have a lot of dissolved sediment, but there's not much life, not much fish,
Yeah.
greenery. What we're seeing is with this runoff of all these fertilizers from agricultural processes, we have these algal blooms, these like influxes of algae in greater amounts than it naturally sees in the body of water. And so the balance kind of gets shaken up.
Yeah.
And so you're left with eventually eutrophic lakes can become oligotrophic lakes that have no life because it blocks all the light from getting to the plants at the bottom. And so the algae produces some oxygen, but it doesn't get dissolved into the water, and they're using oxygen as well. So it just kind of kills the lake in a sense. But I guess just using more natural fertilizers or finding a way to collect all the fertilizer water in one place and not have it get so far as to be in a river or lake or ocean. Because we're seeing, these big toxic algal blooms in the Gulf because we have all of this farmland coming in from both sides entering the Mississippi River that'll eventually reach Louisiana and spill out into the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
So, and that, forgot what it was called. I'm going to butcher this, but it's like the dead zone of the Gulf of Mexico. Fish can't live there. Fishers have seen that these fish in certain areas where algal blooms are prevalent are just, deformed or not there or dead. So it's a big issue for sure.
I have two thoughts.
Yes. That was a long.
No, you're
long.
good. You're good. That was great. Back home, my dad has many jobs. One, he works at the local water department.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, I don't have an exact number, but how many water treatment plants are on the Mississippi. And I think it's a good number above 20. But the thought still kind of remains of like, it was just like a question of like, what is the water like? Because we're still treating it, but you have top of the Mississippi of like first plant, whatever water's coming in the first plant.
Definitely.
But then it's filtered into the community and then filtered back out, and they treat it. But that treated water is then going down the second plant and third plant and down at least 20 plants. And so you wonder what the water looks like for the community at plant 20 as opposed to plant 1.
Yeah,
right?
I wonder.
Because even it's still getting treated, but it's definitely not the same water that's coming in at plant 1.
No. Yeah.
Right? So I thought that was an interesting thought. And you said the Mississippi, and so it made me think of that idea.
Yeah, I did not know that. I didn't know there were that many plants along the Mississippi. But I like to believe that they're making it safe.
Yeah.
But, not something that's perfect, not something that will end these issues of, hyper nitrogenization in the water and just dissolved chemicals and just gook.
Yeah. Because usually we say this thing's good to go out. There's no side effects, right? But there's always a ripple effect, good or bad on things, no matter what, even if you have good intentions, right? And so it's just like a fun question of like, what are the effects we're not seeing, right? And maybe there's none, maybe we're good, but then if you just thought about where to set a house up, you'd rather be at plant 1 than plant 20 at the very least, right? Just mentally speaking, if you're going to settle a family down or something like that, right?
A lot of people along the way are using this water and wasting it and, putting it back into the body of water and then, Yeah.
You
so
think about that and you're like, it just kind of sounds
kind of
yucky,
throws
even
me
though
off.
it's
Yeah.
treated, though.
It
you
is
know?
treated, and we have really good plants out there. But yeah, you definitely have to think about that.
Yeah.
And
Another thought I've heard out there is having houses get hooked up to, I think it's called gray water.
yeah,
Do you know much about that?
yeah. Essentially, that's not drinkable water, not
Mm-hmm.
potable, but it is something you can do your laundry with. Something you can like. I have a few friends that have gray water attachments to their laundry. So they do their laundry, it connects up to, say, the toilet. And then so they can have two uses for the water that they use rather than,
Yeah.
do their laundry and it drains and it
Mm-hmm.
just goes away. So I think gray water is fantastic because it's not something that we're going to be drinking, so it's not harmful,
Yeah.
but it can do another purpose
Yeah.
and kind of get a double whammy,
Yeah.
two for one.
Yeah. Cleaning water, toilet water, water for the lawn.
Exactly.
We don't need to put so much energy
Yeah, gray
into-
water is usually used in sprinkler systems
Yeah.
around neighborhoods and
Yeah. Could you almost use the runoff water from toilets almost as a fertilizer for your lawns? If we built the infrastructure
Interesting.
for that, what do you think of that? I just had this thought, but
We could.
I don't know if you'd want to.
It would probably have to go through one or two sterilization processes. First, I just worry about the smell. Or would we have the same problem if that got into a body of water, like
Yeah.
a clean body, fresh water? If there's too much biological content that
Yeah.
it would have these algae blooms.
Mm.
I don't know. That's interesting. That'd be gross.
Yeah.
But I would also worry about, there's always signs on those sprinklers saying, like, this is gray water, don't drink it.
Mm.
But what if somebody did? It's
No more drinking out of the hose bib.
No more
right?
drinking out of the hose. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, I'm not sure.
You might have breakfast for a second time.
Nope. No kidding. No kidding.
I thought I have many ideas. I don't know. Most of them probably aren't right. But one thought I've had in regards in general to the climate discussion, but it connected to the whole fish thing not being able to live in these warmer, more, is it carbon dioxide that's in the water? Or
It's that there's nothing dissolved in the water.
okay.
So
No
it's
oxygen, right?
No oxygen.
Yeah.
And so, they breathe through their gills.
Yeah.
There's no oxygen in the water.
Yeah.
It's like us being stuck in a chamber without oxygen. So we can't breathe.
Okay.
They suffocate.
The thought, and saying this, I think that we need to take a more meaningful look at what we produce and the runoff effects of all that. I believe in all that for sure. But I wonder to what extent we need to mentally prepare ourselves for what it would look like, that an understanding, I think, to a certain level of environments change, right? And maybe not to the degree that they're changing now, but I would be curious, like within the example of the fish in runoff, if you just give them decades, some
would they
time,
evolve?
would they be able to evolve and be able to handle lower oxygen areas or higher? There's possibly other minerals and stuff like that in this
absolutely. Yeah.
runoff water from plants, whether that's, not to put any judgment on it, but I would imagine over some time they would eventually get used to it, right? Especially if it was a slow trickle. And this connects to another, am I going to remember this thing? It was something with somewhere, maybe like New Zealand or something like that, where they were using geotags to somewhere else, not in the U.S., using geotags to figure out different plots of land that we could think of it, but just different areas to give back to the native peoples that used to live there. And my head eventually goes to, while we're putting, they're not physical borders, but we're outlining where these people can live and stuff like that. And my thought instantly went to, well, environments change. And so while to them it might not be like a physical border, but to us we've cut out pieces of land for people, right? And then eventually those environments are not going to stay the same forever.
Definitely.
They're going to change.
They're going to change.
And
Bound
so
to change.
my question to my friend that was bringing this topic up was like, would you think that they would have to build into their model the understanding that the environment will change and within probably like a decade's
Mhm.
time frame, but at the same time, like these boundaries might have to be manipulated and stuff like that. Like one of the arguments with rising sea levels
Mhm.
is people will just move. We'll just find other places, or we'll
Move
do
to
something
higher
with the
ground.
water. We'll move
Yeah.
to higher ground. There's a, I guess, the crux of the argument is an adaptation argument, right? Where maybe we just need to slow down how rapid some of these things are happening, especially if they're caused by us,
Mhm.
and so that there's just
We
ample
have
time for
time to adapt to.
the living organisms
Mhm.
in the environment to adapt to that, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
What do you think about that whole? That's a big. I outlined a lot, but do you have any thoughts to that?
Not too many, no. I would agree with what you're saying. I just worry, how would that impact the fish?
Mm-hmm.
They might evolve, but to a sense that the water has no oxygen left in it, would life needs oxygen to survive. So would it even be able to survive
Yeah.
in this water? And in terms of sea level rising, I agree. We could easily just move, but I think the problem is, um, most of the places that would be impacted are the largest cities in the world. Japan, underwater, Tokyo, city,
Mm-hmm.
huge.
Yeah.
New York, Los Angeles, all these places, Houston, underwater. Where would we locate all these people?
Yeah.
Where would we, you know, what would that mean in terms of money? That would be $1 trillion impact.
Yeah.
Which I guess I can't see that far in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and it is something that happens over decades. Like
Exactly.
evolution takes a very long
very,
time.
very long time.
And that's
yeah.
why this argument would have to pay homage to slowing down our effects on these things so that there is ample time to adapt,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
I feel like there's not a seat at the table for that idea. To me, some of the more heavily climate oriented
Mhm.
people are, I don't know. To me, when I see what they're picturing for the future, is this environment that is in perfect balance but is not changing, if that makes sense.
An environment has to
And
change,
exactly.
but it goes in waves that eventually will look from afar like a balance.
Okay.
So, I don't know, with the whole temperatures rising thing, we have been rising and dropping for, millennia.
Yeah.
But we need to look at the last spike that we are in right now, and that's that the temperature is rising.
Yeah.
And so we, as humans, the more we populate the Earth, we have seen these changes happen rapidly, and we can see that spike, and we can cross-trace it with our population and say for sure humans have caused this issue. But then there's the argument, humans are part of the environment as well. And so if we are changing the environment, cool, that's how the environment works, it's constantly changing. But we need to learn how to do it at a rate that's sustainable and keep us, obviously we don't want the sea levels to rise. We have billions of dollars put into these cities and lives at stake and homes and people. So
Yeah.
so it's a big issue to tackle.
Yeah. I think not in a geographical
Mhm.
sense, but just in a I don't even know the right word, maybe metaphysical sense,
Mhm.
that our lives and our environment in which our bodies move through is always shifting and always moving, right?
Yep.
And I think that that's some of the mindset that has been lost in a broad scale kind of view of like people try to like hunker down and find their little piece,
Mhm.
and life eventually robs everybody, right? And there's tragedy in the world and there's evil as well. And so to me, it takes a certain amount of strength to find that piece and carve it out.
Definitely.
But then there's, to me, another tier in a higher level, in my point of view, of understanding how to carve out such a place,
Mm-hmm.
but then understanding when that gets underwater, understanding how to carve out a new place and adapt, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not just being able to do it now, but to do it in multiple different iterations in different areas is kind of, I think, the root of why I like the adaptation
Mm-hmm.
kind of angle to these things. And while I think there's a lot of other things that goes into that with maybe not producing or outputting as much carbon and stuff like that as we are now,
Definitely.
at the same time, just in how we choose to live our lives, but then also these other different nooks and crannies of our world, I think if more people could have that, it's partly flexible mindset, but then
Definitely.
also, I don't know, very, this word I heard the other day, perspicacity,
Perspicacity.
the ability to perceive,
Mm-hmm.
to have that perception of I'm good now, but then need to be good
But I see
10
later
years
on.
from
Yep,
now.
yep.
Exactly. So I think it's a great deal of perspicacity when we look at our when you look at it in the scale of climate for
Mhm.
the world, right? That takes a lot of brain power, but I think there needs to be a certain percentage of our
Mhm.
brain power around that, of like what does adaptation look like for us. And I think the quicker we can get our heads wrapped around that, the more
Absolutely.
time we'd have to think about that. And I believe that's twofold within mitigation and stuff like that as well. But I think we hear too much of like what to mitigate and not having an adaptive mindset. If that
Exactly.
makes sense.
Like, yeah, I agree. It's going to impact us eventually, so
Yeah.
we need to have kind of a proactive mindset
Yeah.
to get these things done before we're screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that mindset a lot.
Because in my head's a weird place to be, but like imagine a mirror of like, we know historically there's been ice ages, so to speak,
Definitely,
right?
yeah.
So that means that most likely sometime in the future, and this is just an example of like, we'll possibly be in that position, and that seems so far away, right? Like everything's warmer. We hear about things getting warmer right now, but also things in general just feel warm. We don't have that much ice around us and stuff like that. But at the same time, like I feel that's mirrored with like somebody having their 9 to 5 job, owning a house, trying to pay it off and all that kind of stuff, and not having that perception of people in the past have had their houses repossessed.
Exactly.
They've been fired, different things like that, right? And that ability to perceive what can possibly come. And I think there's a little bit of humility as well around this can happen to me.
Mhm.
This can happen to us, right? And so fortifying yourself, and that's why somebody has a savings and stuff like that, so that if they miss a payment or their car breaks down or anything like that,
They have a buffer.
we have a
Yep,
buffer,
yep,
right?
yep, yep.
And so I imagine that in like the individual sense of
Mhm.
how to maybe think about your life and not think you're safe in your 9 to 5 and stuff like that, but then also have that perception, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
So I don't, in my head, that's how I think of the metaphor of like what that means on the greater scale
For
climate
change,
climate
and
change, but
mitigation,
you can take that to
environmental
any
efforts. Yeah.
domain as well,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, you could apply that to anything.
Yeah.
And it's a good mindset because yeah, we need to think about the future
Yeah.
before we start make changes.
Yeah.
That could cause even worse problems.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
I think that's one of the things that hinders the climate debate so much
Mhm.
is that, at least maybe it's just how it's the tact in which is being tackled right now, but some of the efforts that some people propose, we won't see whether it worked or didn't work until decades down the road. And there's a big issue with somebody can propose this and on some level virtue signal with it, and they won't even be in the same office or position when we actually get results, whether that policy
Mhm.
or that move in the right direction works. And so it's hard to keep people accountable for
Mhm.
that. And I think that's like an issue, I think, with the climate thing, is we're dealing on things on such a broad level and such a scaled level, right? And I don't know how to work around that. And I don't think enough people I don't know, people that are climate change
Mhm.
advocates, I don't know, think about that of like, I'm with you on solving this, but I need a guarantee that this will work
Exactly.
because like they're saying time is of the essence, but any of these things we put in
Will, take decades.
take a
Yeah.
while. And then if it's like, I'm giving you $10 and you're like, maybe not, I give you 20. People want more guarantee. They want less risk on different investments, especially if you want something behind that,
Definitely.
right? And I think that's something that hinders
Yeah.
this movement, right?
Yeah. Especially, yeah, people need a guarantee. People need, a warranty,
Mhm.
a good mindset going into it.
Yeah.
And yeah. It's a good way of thinking about it, because later on down the line, who knows if any of these things that we're doing are actually, solving the issue.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's why we have research. That's why we're doing it. But I don't know another way of kind of
Mhm.
fixing it,
Yeah.
dealing with it without, taking a few years. Because it's a long process just in general. So doing research on it is going to take even longer.
Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure how we
Yeah.
can kind of work with
That's
that.
a huge, that's
yeah, it's
a
it's
huge
it's
problem
a
within a
mouthful.
huge
Yep,
problem
exactly.
to deal with,
Yep.
right? And I know within the social sciences, your intervention you put through, you might think it's going to be good and it has good intentions,
Mhm.
but it's almost horrific how many times it doesn't work when interventions are proposed
Mhm.
and attempted. It's really to me nerve-wracking because that's a little more where I come
Definitely.
from,
Yeah.
right? And there's a classic one. I'm gonna butcher names, but the general thought of the whole thing was they wanted to help inner city youth, especially the ones that were a little bit more, let's say, below grade level
Mhm.
and maybe more obnoxious in class, like that type of kid, right? And so they developed a summer program to take all these kids, get them together, have specific resources and teachers there to
Mhm.
help them, and throughout the summer that they can get them back on track. And it sounds like a great program, but then what they found was you put so many antisocial kids together that it becomes a competition between who can be more antisocial instead of who can be more social.
So there's a competition.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it sounds like a good idea. Let's get all the kids that are
Exactly.
not doing well. Let's get them the resources and then have
To
them
do
doing
well.
well.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was the hope, and it ended up backfiring, right?
Definitely.
And that's more of a social sciences thing than
Yeah.
a climate sciences thing, so to speak. But we have to have some insurance around interventions that we put into play in general, right?
Absolutely.
And that's why we have tests. But again, circling back, the tests we're talking about takes decades,
Yep.
if not maybe centuries, to even see a return, positive or
Mhm.
negative, right? And it's hard to. It's a big thing, and we're only
Exactly.
in our 20s, right, to even tackle that. But I think a good start at least is to acknowledge it,
Mhm.
right? But that's like 1% of the
Yeah.
pie of what to do.
Acknowledge
right?
where we're at,
Yeah.
what we're kind of dealing with.
Yeah.
Might not have a guarantee, but we got to acknowledge it and understand kind of what scientists are trying to do.
Yeah. But it bothers me that that doesn't have enough seat at the table,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think, which is where acknowledging comes. But I don't know. Maybe I'm not as keyed in as other people are, so maybe
Mhm.
I'm not seeing the whole picture. But to me, we need more of a in-depth
Mhm.
look at exactly these things, right?
Definitely.
Because the devil's in the details as well. It really is. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I kind of went on a rant, I feel like.
I don't have too many thoughts on that. No.
What
Can't
ma-
really say much
Yeah.
more.
What made you choose your major?
I originally wanted to do meteorology.
Okay.
And I've always loved weather, climate, and I thought, how can I kind of, I don't know, I'm not the best at math, and I didn't want to sit in front of a computer for the rest of my life, which I kind of saw myself doing if I did meteorology.
Yeah.
So I thought, what can I do that can, involve climate, environment, hiking, being out in the field, doing all this research that I love, while also just bringing everything together into one perfect major.
Mhm.
And CSU had it,
Okay.
ecosystem science.
Yeah.
And kind of struck my eye, in kind of holding everything that I love into one major.
Yeah. So if you could set up your career perfectly to
Okay.
your liking,
Yeah.
do you have any thought of what that would look like for you?
I would like to hopefully work for the National Park Service later
Okay.
on. Just do research, be out in the field, start from the bottom, go to the top, and get kind of the science from the start, from the root
From
of
the
everything.
field, right?
From the field, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What does the top look like when you say that?
Like, I was saying more, like do the research from the root, which is
Okay.
field research, rather than kind of being further down the line
Yeah.
and having to rely on other people's
Yeah.
research.
Like you were saying, instead of looking at the screen of these data points, actually
Exactly.
be surveying the data points on the ground, right?
Definitely.
That's
Yeah.
that your idea?
Yeah. I want to create the data. I
Yeah.
want to analyze the data. I want to figure out the problem from the source.
Yeah.
And I would love to just teach people, just
Mhm.
have conversations just like this with
Yeah.
people in the park.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a ranger. I probably wouldn't be a park ranger. I don't want to be nature police. I want to inform people. I want to educate people
Yeah.
about these things.
So what does that look like then? Do you know what position that would be?
I'm not entirely sure. No,
Okay.
haven't really looked into it. But I guess end goal, maybe professor.
Yeah.
Educate people from
Yeah.
a college standpoint, like later career type stuff. But yeah, I mean, also that's all up in the air. I have
Yeah.
no idea.
Yeah.
Just going into my junior year, I'll probably figure something out. But I also want to get my pilot's license. I want to be able to, and I'm a photographer as well. So if I can kind of put all of those together
Yeah.
into this perfect career
Yeah.
of flying out to the field, taking photos that could be for National Geographic, highlighting the issues that we are causing in the environment. And I love to hike. I love 14ers. So if I could be out in the field and hike and do research and and any of those things that I just said, I would
Yeah.
love to do.
Yeah. You could probably get to some more remote areas, right?
Absolutely.
With flight
Yep.
as well.
Yeah, and exactly. That's why I would want to do it. Just have a small, like 2-person bush plane to be able to fly really anywhere and take samples where you can't hike out to or you can't drive. You can't. It's the only way to get there.
Yeah.
But I've been thinking lately, I've been really into weather. And so I was thinking for grad school, if I end up doing that to be more competitive and to be more well-rounded, I would do some climate research, meteorology. I would take that love for meteorology and weather and put it into an environmental sense rather than just, National Weather Service, just informing people.
What do you think about the weather engineering? That's kind of
Weather engineering.
Yeah,
Like, are
good
you
idea.
talking like the government controlling the weather?
Yes. Do you know? Have
I
any
don't
thoughts
know-
on that whole topic?
I don't know much about
I
it.
don't either. To be
I
honest,
will say I don't believe that they're,
I don't think there's like a
creating
conspiracy
weather.
of like
Yeah.
there is creation, but I would imagine at the very least there's people in the headspace of like
Yeah.
what could we do to influence the weather, and most likely, help with. I would imagine at least help with droughts
Absolutely.
and stuff like that, right?
I haven't looked much into it, to
Okay.
be honest.
Yeah.
But that would be something I'd be interested in looking into.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It sounds like it's from like a superhero film
Yeah.
or something like that,
Changing the weather,
Yeah. And it's just like
we could do it. I just think at the scale that weather is, especially to cause a drought to, reverse, would be almost impossible, in my opinion. I guess planting more trees, that would cause more, what is it? transpiration through the leaves, and so
Mm.
that's more moisture in the air.
Mm.
More moisture in the air, the more precipitation you have, especially near mountain ranges and stuff.
Okay.
So I think just planting more trees, but then there's the issue of the soil is horrible and dry.
Yeah.
So how are we supposed to plant more trees if
And fires from those
and
trees.
fires and then where are we gonna get the water from?
Yeah.
It's all
Yeah.
a tough process.
Yeah. The ecosystem is very complex.
Yep. And
Yeah.
there's a bunch of things going on, but they all really do balance each other
Yeah.
out. And when we see, different species decline or increase, we see this graph of, 500 different species.
Mm-hmm.
They all end up looking like a straight line in the end. They're
Yeah.
going up and down because of each other, but if we remove one of them, the balance gets kind of taken out.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's just framing the picture too
Exactly.
of where to frame it.
Yep.
Because you could frame it on a spike of right when a rabbit's killed,
Exactly.
but then zero that out and it's a little
And it's,
different. Right?
If you average all the values, it's
Yeah.
equal.
Yeah.
It's
Could you imagine a reality where the Forest Service almost just looks at a screen, almost as a water plant would look at like what contents are in the water flow, and they see all these different ticks of, oh, there's nitrogen, or oh, there's this many rabbits and this many foxes and this
Definitely,
many
yeah.
pine trees and stuff like that, where they would just see the curves and they would just have to make a tweak or a button or put something in, to in a sense where it's like, I don't know, very regulated or technical, right? Where do you imagine like it going that course in a sense where you're just kind of balancing levers and stuff like that instead of actually?
I mean, it could. Just in general, we're moving towards a more analytical, technological way of thinking, even with a major or a field such as environmental science. Probably not in the near future. We wouldn't be looking at it like that. We need people out in the field, observing, taking data right from the source. But I mean, obviously, those data points end up going onto the computer, and we form graphs from it.
Yeah.
But I don't think in the near future we'll be at a point where we can just look at it, touch a button, figure out where to add or take away something to balance.
Yeah.
The ecosystem is way too complex for what we're trying to deal with.
Yeah. To me, it could be like a recipe almost, where you have
yeah.
like 3 cups of deer, a cup and a half of rabbits, and all these different things. It'd be interesting to see it like that, I don't know. Like, I just imagine a reality of like just some dude staring at a computer and they see rabbits kind of spiking, so they add a couple more foxes, and then
Exactly.
But then the foxes, I don't know, are eating the shrub, and then you got to figure out, it'd be a weird reality where it's almost just all behind a computer.
It'd be hard to regulate. It'd be hard to get it right every time. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Keep the levels
Yeah,
balanced?
yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Because it's so complex. We would almost need AI to figure it out for us.
What if that was
humans
the
can't
case?
figure that out?
What if we just had AI managing our ecosystems? Because at a certain point,
It's a
with
scary
AI
world.
learning, they could
Machine learning
understand those
and-
balances and what percentage of what influences what, right? And they would understand that mathematics more than us.
Yup. Everything's math.
Yeah.
In a sense. Yeah, I'm not sure. That'd be a scary world.
That'd be wild,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, where you just need...
Everything will get to that eventually, but not in my lifetime, that's for sure.
What is 14er culture?
14er culture.
That was a word you used.
Yeah.
So I like it. I've never heard that phrase.
I don't know. Just hiking in general. Hiking
Yeah.
culture.
Okay.
Just, I don't know. It's become such a big thing in Colorado. Everybody wants to complete the 58 14ers, and I'm one of them. So I just thought I'd bring that up, talk about it.
How many do you have down?
I have 21 down so far.
Okay. That's a
in
good
the
number.
3 summers that I've lived here.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good
including this
number.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy about it. It's taken a lot out of me, but
Yeah.
I'm happy about it.
What do you think? I appreciate people getting outside, but
Mhm.
it seems like we have an abundance of people that want to be outside
We
right
sure
now,
do.
so to
Yep.
speak. And I miss my dispersed camping that I find back home.
Mhm.
Being up here is one thing I've been really missing because I just want to go somewhere, not have to pay to
Exactly.
live,
Yeah.
to sit there or anything like that, and just find a spot and park a tent. But I understand at the same time that Colorado gets so many tourism
Yeah.
from that point.
And like, I'm originally from Texas,
Mhm.
so I'm one of those transplants as you speak.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I talk with my brother a lot about this too.
Mhm.
Like, what is your thought on tagging on Instagram or social media of some sort where exactly you hiked or where this photo was taken?
Yeah.
Because I used to be in the mindset, oh, I'm going to safeguard, like, this is my spot. I don't want anybody knowing where this is.
Yeah.
Then I was like, I don't know. I never want to do that. Yes, it's getting overpopulated, but, I mean, people are starting to figure out how beautiful Colorado is, how beautiful, Oregon, all these places with beautiful hikes, how beautiful they are. And I don't want to, baby guard that, safeguard it from other people
Yeah.
enjoying it. So I usually tag where, at least close proximity to where I hiked. Like, I'll tag Colorado, or I'll tag, like, Indian Peaks Wilderness or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
I've heard about it. I don't pay much mind to it, if I understand both arguments though.
Definitely.
I personally don't put any thought into it whatsoever, I understand the idea of like back home there's a few hikes right near our house, but then there's one hike that's not marked on a map, but it is heavily trafficked by hunters.
Okay.
There's a big hunter's camp
Yep.
up top. So I can imagine why like that type of person wouldn't want to advertise that because it's their route they kind of dug out
Exactly.
for horse trail
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But it's something that's still open to the public, and a lot of people traffic it at this point, that it's like a local hike. So I understand wanting to keep that on the down low,
Definitely.
right? And I think at this point, like Colorado just being Colorado is enough advertisement in
Oh, yeah.
general. My approach to life is abundance.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me personally, I don't think it's a big deal if I do tag things, because in my head and in my heart, there should be enough places for everybody to go. But right now, it doesn't feel like that.
Does not feel
is
like
the
that.
thing.
Yeah.
It feels very scarce in the sense of like being able to find your own camp spot and not have any neighbors. Or one thing that blows my mind that I haven't personally experienced but seen is like to summit some mountains or trails, there's a waiting line on the trail. And I've seen photos and videos of that, and that blows me away. And I'm like, hey, what do you do about that, right? Where like you just want to hike to the top. And for some people, the hike is hard enough, right? And then it's
Then you have
like,
to
I'm going to get to the top and I'm going to wait. Like it's an amusement park ride, or I'm waiting for a movie or something like that. And it's supposed to be nature in the sense that everything's open and free. And while you want to stay on trail, it's your pace, but then it's not your pace. And then it loses that essence of hiking in some sense.
Yeah.
And so there's a balance there. But I don't know if like we just need more trails. I don't know if we need,
like more fees,
more
like
fees,
reservations.
But then the dispersed camping goes down.
Exactly.
That's
it's
something I've been thinking in my head a lot as well.
It's a whole dynamic system.
Yeah.
And you had the point of like just saying Colorado, just tagging Colorado is enough.
Yeah.
People will find where they fit in. But I like to think if a trail is really heavily trafficked, and I mean it's because it's beautiful. People find it. They tell their friends. They tell their family, this is a pretty trail, and you should come hike it. So Yosemite, Rocky Mountain National Park, what are the like Glacier,
Zion,
super populated. You have to get reservations and stuff, which It's a headache most
Yeah.
of the time, but I think it's a good thing we have them just to kind of allow everybody to see it, but in a way that doesn't get, take away from the enjoyment of
Yeah.
being in some of these parks,
Yeah.
or even just trails in general. But yeah,
Yeah, and so there is still the barrier of like local knowledge of you might know like this particular area
Definitely.
you could hike into and pitch a tent and nobody would know.
Exactly.
And so part of it's I just don't know the area. I know back home a lot better, And so maybe I just need to get my ear to the ground more,
Maybe.
and be that local of like knowing the spots
Mhm.
at some point. Yeah, because that's a tricky balance. That's another problem within Colorado in a sense of the balance of accessibility
Mhm.
and making things inaccessible, because inaccessible things are higher valued,
Definitely.
right?
Yep.
Climbing a mountain is a lot bigger deal than climbing a hill, but then you get to the close to the mountain and there's a line and it ruins some of that, at least in my head, right? But I again come back to having an abundance head of like there should be enough.
There
There's
should
enough for
be,
everybody.
yeah.
That's where my headspace is always
There's
at.
enough to go around, and there should be.
Yeah, which makes me wonder if we just need. I don't know. I wouldn't mind paying like. I don't know if we could have micro fees maybe, instead of these. I don't know. To me, like paying $30 to pitch my tent somewhere feels weird when like I could double that and be in a crappy motel.
Yeah.
Almost in some places, like so to speak.
Yeah.
Where like maybe if like you just had multiple sites for $5 a piece or something like that, and I know those funds are getting cycled back into the grounds being maintained. I don't know. Maybe I'm also a little cheap as well, but I also come from
Same way.
yeah. But again, I always come from an area of just being able to almost walk in one direction and being able to pitch a tent, So yeah, I've thought about that a little bit, but
Absolutely.
I don't know the exact method, so to speak. I think it's a telltale sign when you have waiting lines on the top of mountains. I think that's a sign.
To change something.
Yeah. And maybe it's just me not being a local and having no knowledge
Mm-hmm.
that I can't find enough things around
Mhm.
here, and it's probably on me. I would take more of that tact. But yeah, I think that's another problem.
Definitely.
We need to iron out as Coloradans in a sense. Because I'm not, I'm not against transplanters coming, so to speak, but we got to figure out where to put everybody.
Where do you put everybody?
Yeah.
Without raising costs, without running out of space.
Yeah.
Without
Yeah. And I was talking to a friend about this the other night, and Fort Collins has a pretty big limit on how high a building can go. And I wonder if that's to our detriment in the sense that we can't stack people up on it themselves, because they were originally talking about it as a good thing because something
preserves
preserving
the
things.
view.
The view. But I guess there's not much of a view on the plains.
Yeah.
And to house 50 families in 50 different households would disrupt more square footage of prairie land, right?
Yep.
Instead of just having one plot of land that goes up.
Yep.
Was my argument with them. So I don't know. Yeah, but then it's...
I mean, that's why you can fit so many people in New York City.
Yeah.
You have more vertical space rather than horizontal. And I think, there's an argument for each way. But I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess it'd be hard to transform Fort Collins from horizontal to vertical, especially with the policies in place for buildings, I think, like higher than 10 stories or something like that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that would kind of need.
And one thought I just had was you can't go vertical with camping, right?
Yeah.
You have to go horizontal with that in the sense of allowing somebody to pitch a tent in different smaller plots of land, but same thing. Do you have any thought towards that of like, I don't know, developing more land for campgrounds?
For camping?
Or more trails, just to kind of allow people to spread out more?
I think having a few more trails would be fantastic, and there are groups out there in Colorado that are building trails right as we speak. I don't know, where do we draw the line? How many trails is too many trails. How many campsites are too many campsites? But I mean, every once in a while, I see a dispersed campsite, nobody there. So I guess just the closer you look, you can find it if you really want to.
Yeah.
But I'm not too much of a dispersed camper quite yet. So I haven't, dug into it too much. But
Yeah.
yeah, I understand kind of where you're coming from.
Yeah.
With you used to be able to just kind of walk
Yeah.
and get to a place to pitch a tent, but now you have to look. Or Rocky Mountain National Park, you have to look a month in advance for reservation
Yeah.
spots and timed entry, or there's always a permit for something
Yep.
nowadays, and if you don't do your research, you're gonna be disappointed. So yeah, I don't know how many more trails we can build without disrupting too much of the environment.
Yeah. Do you think if we had, I think first a good ethic, but then also just a good backing of people being able to stay on the trail, that we could be more flexible of where we put them, because it's
Absolutely.
just somebody going through nature, right? Instead of divulging from the trail and trampling grasslands and
Definitely,
stuff like that.
yeah.
So,
Like trails are not the issue. Trails are low impact.
yeah.
Animals can still cross it. Doesn't impact wildlife too much. It's more just, it's the social trails. It's the trails that people just make bushwhacking. Isn't a problem if one or two people do it, but when a bunch of people, I'm up on these 14ers and I see 3 or 4 trails, no marking. It's just people going off doing their
meandering.
own thing. It starts to become an issue because it does kill, the wildlife and everything around the area. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I know when you get up above tree line, it's less of an issue about, killing vegetation, because it's mostly just rocks. So social trails are fine up there, but when you're in the woods, when you're in below tree line, just stick to the trail. It's easy. If you have to use the restroom, do all the pack it in, pack it out, leave no trace ethics. But
Yeah. Is there a particular theme or overarching problem that you have in mind when you went for your degree? Does that make sense, that question?
Not entirely. Like what sparked me to choose that?
Yeah.
In terms of an issue.
But you have the technicalities of I want to get into nature and survey the land and stuff like that. But does that feed something bigger than yourself of that will result in this, which will result in this, which will positively affect the zeitgeist of this entire domain? If that makes sense. Do you have any thought towards that?
Not necessarily. No, I originally just, like I said, wanted to have this major that had everything I love. But I also, with my hiking background, when I moved to Colorado, I knew I wanted to preserve that, keep that, beauty there. Because if something happens to nature and mountains, and I mean, they're going to live longer than me, obviously, but just trying to preserve that beauty for future generations. My children, I want them to be able to see that and appreciate it as much as I do. So I didn't really have a specific problem. I've actually kind of learned more about the problems in my major that have resulted from, climate change and stuff.
Like what?
Like
The specific problems that you've learned.
Just I didn't have the knowledge that I do today without being in the climate change classes. I didn't have one specific thing that sparked one problem that sparked me into being in this major. It was more I wanted to preserve the environment, and then I learned from that in my classes.
Okay, I gotcha.
If that makes sense.
I think so. Is there particular examples that you have that you can draw off of, or is it just kind of you have more of a detailed knowledge?
I have a deeper understanding of the problems that I already kind of knew. That existed. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Because you don't want too many trails, but you don't want no trails because we want to be able to enjoy it. So it's again figuring out that balance of things.
we are in the environment as well.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I want to be able to enjoy that, but I'm also an environmental scientist. So, and like I'm all for sustainability, but I'm also for, getting out there, being in the mountains. Humans can live up there just as much as bears, wolves, and
Yeah.
moose. So
Yeah. What do you think about hunting?
hunting. I don't do it, but
Mhm.
I also don't care too much
Yeah.
about it. I like at the rate that most people do it, it's okay. It's sustainable, and especially if they're not doing it solely for the rack or for
The thrill of the kill.
the thrill of the kill. They're doing it for sustenance and to be able to feed their families or just have meat for the year or sell it to a butcher shop. But it is a resource more than anything, and so we have to use every part of it when we do kill it.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with hunting. I wouldn't do it. I'm not okay with that. But it also depends on the animal. Like obviously,
Yeah.
I would never ever kill a moose or a bear. But if it's a deer or something that is solely used for consumption and using it for their meat, I think it's okay.
Yeah. Why is there a line between deer and moose and bear for you?
Just less populous. There's more deer in this world than moose and bears, and I don't know. I guess I'm biased. They're just I don't know, beautiful creatures,
Okay.
and yeah, that's
Okay.
about it.
Yeah, because assuming to go out and kill one, you would have to get a tag, and therefore it was regulated to where you weren't affecting numbers and population and stuff like that. So for you, it's more of just you hold those creatures up to a higher level, would you
Standards,
say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And they're found in less environments.
Okay.
Deer have a greater
Spread.
footprint
Yeah.
on the world than all these high alpine kind of forest creatures.
Okay, I gotcha. Because I know you're talking about locally sourcing your meat, and that's one answer to instead of going out and buying it,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, hunting.
But would you say you wouldn't really consider that as an option for yourself personally?
For myself personally, no.
Yeah. And is that just the killing aspect of it for you, or what is that?
It's less the killing. I mean, if you do it right, they don't feel anything, and
Yeah.
they're like
It's almost more humane.
It's more humane.
Yeah.
It's more just. Yeah, it really is just a killing thing. Like I don't see any interest in doing that. I would rather just source my meat in a humane way, but from a local farm
Yeah.
or something like
Would
that.
you pay a hunter for the meat that he got?
Yeah,
Would that be fine?
I would.
with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, because at some point I grew up in a hunting community more because we're
Definitely.
rural.
Yeah.
But my family never did, and so at some point,
Would they buy from hunters around the area, or?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. Or my mom would go to one of our friends' house often and help them process it, and in return, get meat. So in a sense,
Definitely.
but more trading time.
Yeah.
But I have too many interests. But at some point, I would like to be able to, purchase a firearm and then also get I don't even know exactly what it takes, but the ability to track and kill, to be able, because it's connected to the factory farming industry, I think for both of us, right, where it's very comparatively it's very inhumane how that meat is sourced, and while right now it's more of like a financial thing and a experience and knowledge barrier of being able to go out, right, that is a goal I have for myself. Definitely. To be able to do that at some point, right? And the quality, I think, is just so much better in general. And I eat a lot of food as well because I'm pretty active and everything like that. I bet you're pretty active and you eat a lot, and so it's probably, and also the money is just usually recycled back into the conservation and everything like that, right?
Yeah.
What do you think about, and it's not the type of people I'm talking about are not ones that go for the thrill of the kill, but purchase tags from here in the U.S., purchase tags from other countries or continents to go there and then kill some other animal. The classic thought is like a rhino or different things like that. Do you have a different thought or anything towards that topic?
Similar to the moose and bear type thing,
You hold them on a higher.
I hold them on at a higher level, higher standard.
Yeah.
So, no, it's not okay to
Mhm.
kill those animals, even for. Yeah, even for meat. Give or take. If it's a small village and that's all you really have in the area, I see it, but you have to use the entire animal.
Yeah.
These poachers go out and they just
For the
kill
horn.
these elephants and the rhinos for the horn.
Yeah.
Which is not okay
Yeah.
because you're
Yeah.
wasting this animal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do not. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's okay to do that unless it's the only source of protein in the area,
Mhm.
and you're a small town and you're not creating much of an impact.
Yeah. I've heard from some friends they're against it from a different point of view of they really don't like the idea of somebody that's an outsider coming in
Yeah.
to somebody else's place and killing one of their animals, right?
Mhm.
That's the argument I've heard. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that particular argument, if you side with that or if anything like that.
I would probably side with that as
Yeah.
well. I don't know. It's hard because you can't like claim like you have a plot of land, so yes, I guess any animal that crosses that land is yours. You can claim that, but I see both sides of the
Mhm.
argument. I can see where the native person on that land would not want an outsider taking their sustenance, but also is it kind of their place to
Yeah.
say that or
Yeah.
to kind of regulate
Yeah.
it?
And this
It's so hard.
I've heard that argument, and from a particular person I saw talking about this, they were particularly focusing on that the person was an outsider coming in,
Mhm.
and that was the main problem. Even when context was provided of this, let's say hypothetically, and this happens as well, it was a type of animal that was either threatening livestock or threatening people. And because that happens often, even
Mhm.
up here with mountain lions that get into towns and are kind of picking away at some of the population,
Definitely,
right?
yeah.
So I think those tags are easily justified, you
Mhm,
know, in a
mhm.
sense of it's a
Public safety.
yeah, public safety
Yeah,
and
and-
everything like that. But they still had a problem with that tag being provided to somebody outside, even if all these other avenues were covered where it was a dangerous animal, it was a threatening animal, the resources, so to speak, of the animal would be properly accounted for and used and stuff like that. They still did not like the idea of somebody coming in just by the outsider argument,
Mhm.
which I think to me is a little extreme,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it's a fine line.
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of say. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because if I think one of the problems they had with it was like it's hard to say I have ownage over this
Mhm.
animal, right?
Yeah.
But in the sense it's in the area and stuff like that. So you have a little bit more than somebody that's overseas.
Yeah, who has jurisdiction over it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in my head, because they publicly created this tag for this animal, they want somebody to come in.
They have the right to
come in, and
Yeah.
it's totally different if somebody sneaks a fence and different things like
and
that.
kills
But
it
if it's
then,
a
yeah, but-
particular tag set out for anybody to come in, and usually when you open it up to the whole market, you can get a higher bid where not only does the animal get used, but then
Mhm.
also all the funds generated from such a ticket also can be reinvested back into the community
Mhm.
or back into the conservation of that area,
Definitely.
particularly. And even when that was brought up for the person, they still weren't a fan of it. And to me, that just, I don't know. It's not taking any scope of the picture into account.
Yeah, kind of closed off, closed-minded.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had never thought about that.
Because they would, I don't want to speak for them,
Yeah.
but I think they did use, like, it's almost getting connected to, in their point of view, like colonialism.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's a flimsy argument in the
Kinda
sense of like
yeah.
they're asking somebody to come in and then they're leaving, you know, and they're just doing one
Like if
particular
they have the permit
thing.
for it, they have a
Yeah.
tag for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they have permission
Yeah.
to do so. Yeah, it's a valid opinion, valid argument, but I think I side like with you
Okay.
with.
Do you think there is an ethical argument of like people going to other places, even if there's all these different almost regulations or structures put into place so that things aren't abused? To me, it's almost advertised, and we're saying, hey, come here. And to me, it's to their benefit to do that, because then you can have a higher ticket item for people, because people around the world can then bid on such a thing of wanting to kill a rhino, right? Which is something that's rare. And while to them it might be to some level a thrill for the kill, but the consequences of that mean that if it is, in the hypothetical, a dangerous animal, or at the very least this money gets filtered back into the community, then to me it's a net positive.
Definitely.
For everybody.
Yeah.
And then to close it off to maybe just that community or just that region might be limiting the positive benefit of this type of thing, is my point of view, right? And then critics of that would make a colonialism argument for it, or against it, which I don't see personally. I hear the argument, but I don't see any legs under that. To me, it's flimsy.
Yeah.
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 Would you feel, because I'm not in the conservation space or mindset, but just looking at it as an outsider, to me.
Yeah, I haven't looked into it too
Okay.
much, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I wonder what the repercussions of, this later on with having these permits, even having the permit or a tag, how will that impact the wildlife? How will that impact endangered animals? How will that?
Yeah.
But like you said, with them being, say, a mountain lion, like dangerous for the community if it gets out of the bounds that they, are in the environment.
Yeah.
I can see where somebody could have the argument for killing that animal, just for human safety.
Yeah. To me, that's an easy argument to
absolutely,
argue for, right?
Absolutely. And obviously, protect yourself.
Yeah.
Just a few weeks ago, up near, I believe, like near Nederland, Colorado, kind of near Brainerd Lake Recreation Area, there was a moose that charged somebody. They had to shoot them, which in that case, it's valid. Just make sure you use that moose in a way that's sustainable. Yeah. And use every part of it, rather than obviously just killing it.
Yeah.
And
Letting it decay.
Leaving it to decay and just cause more issues. But I don't know. It's a tough argument to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think with nuance and context, it's a little possibly easier, I think the easy answers are the ones that are threatening livestock or people.
Yeah.
It gets a little more gray when it's maybe just like 10 rhino tags this community does a year, in a sense, where hopefully the community is doing their diligence that these 10 rhinos are of the overpopulation than underpopulation, right?
Definitely.
And then in that case, I think, again, then it's an easy answer of let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go through. Yeah. I thought it was particularly interesting to be so focused on the colonial part of it, even when it's, to me, not because there's an invitation in that exchange. Definitely. And it is more of like an exchange than somebody conquering, right? So, I don't know. I wanted to bring that up because I thought it was an interesting thing, and it is within the conservation space, and
everything has to be thought of in a sustainability way. We can use resources, but we don't want to overuse these resources, because then we're left with nothing. As long as we source everything sustainably, it's fine.
Okay. I think that's
from a conservation
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
person like me.
And I think that's very smart because it takes a little bit of the morals out of it,
Yeah.
which I think maybe that person was maybe a little too gripped by, so to speak, right? Where it's just a little more logical of like, if it's in benefit of the community and ecosystem, who cares who does it? So as a rule of thumb, right? And I think some people would be like, I care who does it because it's not somebody native doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you limit that, then the possible positive benefits
Mm-hmm.
of having if you look at it from like a business perspective of having more of a market, right, could lead more to more of a benefit for the community. Would be my point of view,
Absolutely.
I guess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking, do you have any takeaways for yourself with the pandemic?
Ooh. I don't know. Just being a college student and entering into freshman year with like this crazy pandemic going on.
Did it hit when you were in high school as a senior?
Yeah.
Is that when that was for you? Okay.
Well, it's tough. Everybody had the argument, oh, it's new. We're not going to have a vaccine for, years to come. We had already had that vaccine essentially set. We just needed to switch it from SARS-CoV-2 to, that is COVID. But the SARS virus from 2011 or 12, I believe, it's the same virus, just a different, the spikes on the outside of the virus, it's a different strand.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we got the vaccine out pretty quickly, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think we did a good job.
Yeah.
I think the hardest part was getting people to follow the rules, or especially in Fort Collins, there was definitely a backlash with having a mask mandate after having it being taken away. People get their rights taken away from them, but then they have to, they're free and then they have to do it again.
Yeah.
There's going to be some, backlash from that.
Yeah.
But I think Fort Collins did a good job. I think CSU did a good job in relation to other schools and other towns. Couldn't say the same for some places, but I think it was new for everybody, and I don't know. It didn't impact my life too much. I don't like to complain too much about it, more think of the positives of it, which is that we're more prepared for another one if it does come along.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
I heard that it eventually made its way into like deer populations and stuff like that.
I did not hear that. Interesting.
Oh, okay.
That's.
I was going to ask if there was any
Yeah,
thought paid to,
I had no
because it
idea.
eventually mutates to other animals,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so that they tested it and found it within some deer populations, I know, and this was like last year and stuff. So I was curious if you guys had any focus or intention paid within your
No.
major of like if it had any stream effects to the ecosystem as a
Yeah.
whole, but
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like
No,
there was.
I had no
Okay.
no information on that. That's interesting.
Yeah. And that was kind of some of the argument of like against later lockdowns of like against the people that thought that we could totally get rid of this virus, where it was like, this is in now other animals within our ecosystem and it can jump easy.
It's going to be around forever.
Yeah.
It's going to be a flu. It's
Yeah.
going to be, booster every year, but that's kind of what we have to live with, deal with.
Yeah. Man, I'd be interested if you dig in more in that and see if it was affecting our populations
Absolutely.
of animals
Yeah.
or plants for that matter, whatever the downstream effects of that look like, again, because there's waves from things that we don't even
Definitely
know that were possible that come out of it. So if you learn anything, let me know.
Yeah,
about
will
that,
do,
'cause
will do.
that'd be kind of interesting to hear. I don't know, it made deer weaker or made them stronger, because it affects each life form differently, right? So, but that'd all be hypotheticals to go down that road. But I guess I originally asked the question more for like, how did it change your life personally?
Okay. Not too much. I mean, I was always a fairly clean person. Always wash my hands.
Mm-hmm.
Always hand sanitize. Which there's the argument of, like the super bug, like kind of overdoing it sometimes can cause issues down the line. But it didn't impact my life too much.
Okay. Were you back in Texas when this happened, or were you in Colorado?
Originally, yeah, I was back in Texas when it first struck, and then I moved that summer up here and went to school. 2020, fall of 2020 was when it was rough. It was all online, just... Yeah.
What was that like for you, being a new freshman and everything like that?
Not too bad. I would say the biggest impact that I had being a college student was it was hard to find friends, or you tried to kind of push yourself into a friend group without, like, if you know what I mean, like, it wasn't natural. It didn't seem. You kind of push yourself into this friend group, or try to find friends in an unnatural way. Just like reaching out on different social media platforms, or at least that's what I did. I was just nervous I wouldn't find any friends in Colorado, but obviously I find a bunch of cool people that have the same interests and stuff. So
was it more like, because I've observed, especially with freshmen coming in, with things being in person is what I'm talking about, is there's like the first 1, 2, 3 months where everybody is like hyper social because everybody's new here, right? And it's really cool to see that, especially like looking back as being like a sophomore, junior, senior, just looking back and now graduated and seeing people with that mindset, because there's like an energy in the air. So was it for you where you were trying to push in, because everybody in a sense was in your same boat of freshmen coming in, of not having any friends? So I'm not in that position. To me, I would imagine like people were just trying to be hyper social online initially. Did people already somehow figure out friends groups and you were behind in that and you were trying to break in? Or I'm trying to really contextualize what that was like for you.
Essentially, through CSU, there was this app called like the Schools app.
Okay.
It was just a way for, people in, whether it be your major or your dorm that you're going to be living in, to kind of connect.
Okay.
Which I thought was a really good program, but I'm not sure if it turned out. It seemed very forced. I was always the person just to go
Initiating?
up to, initiate the conversation, go up to somebody random, make friends. But with COVID, obviously you couldn't, hang out in public spaces too often. So it was hard, and having the masks on, it was hard to get facial expressions, hard to it was just a tough time for everybody, I think. Making friends, kind of getting that emotional connection to somebody. Is that kind of the answer you're looking for?
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Like,
and then I would imagine there's some people that would almost disregard rules at that time, and some people that would be asking for more rules, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, it's like almost there's already anxiety going up to meet somebody, but then maybe extra, because then if you try to be too forward and want to get to know them and like maybe even meet without masks and stuff like that, some people would be all for that,
exactly.
or they're gonna withdraw from that, right? So do you think it added to the anxiety of meeting people?
Absolutely, yeah. And everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but I kind of took the sense that, like, healthcare workers, they know more than me about this, so I'm gonna listen to them, whether I like it or not. If I do this, I thought eventually it'll go away. It will fix itself. So that was kind of my mindset on it, and I guess I knew a few people that had some backlash to that, and I knew a few people that kind of took it too far and followed the rules too much, and it kind of I don't know, living in this shell in this box with a mask on is not great. So I try to get out as much as possible while being safe about it. But also not being too closed off.
So I would imagine it would add more anxiety just to interactions in general. Because I'm a hyper, I don't know, like sensitive in the sense of like really caring about what the other person's
You're
state.
what is that? Empathetic?
I think so. Yeah. And so,
You
like, I personally, especially back then, would respect whatever people wanted.
Definitely.
But to
I
me,
respect.
I would like less masking is
Yeah.
my point of view
Definitely.
from back then. So I'm like, if you're cool with it, take that off so then we can actually see each other and be
Exactly.
humans, right? But again, if you want to do that, I'm not going to tell you what to do
Yeah.
or
I
take your mask
respect
off you, right?
anybody's opinion on
Yeah.
that because
Yeah.
they're just looking after their own and others' safety.
Yeah.
And yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah. And I don't imagine, like, thankfully, I mean, I'm a little older, so I had a
Yeah.
little more of an established friend group here, thankfully, at that time. So I would just imagine that's another layer of complexity and anxiety to social interaction with new people,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I don't necessarily envy that, so to speak. Was it hard finishing? What was it like finishing
Finishing
your
high
senior
school.
year of high school? Was it online for you, or what did that look
Yeah,
like?
it was online. It was just Canvas. That program. It was just online on that. I would finish my work, Monday or Tuesday, and have the rest of the week just to do whatever I wanted. So it kind of felt like a joke to me. Graduation was good. It was in person. It was outside. Everybody wore masks, which was great. It was nice to see everybody one last time, see all my teachers, but it seemed very abrupt. I don't know. I remember looking online. It was like 13 cases in China. Cool. And then a week later, it just like it's in the U.S. Everything happened so quickly. I was on spring break in like Alabama with my friends, and school got canceled for a week. We never went back after that, which was a really weird like shock almost.
Yeah.
In my life.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, because at one point you're like, there's just like this little cold overseas, right? And
Yep.
then I was in my second year or third year of college, but first year up here. And then it was like, we're just going to send people back home for a little bit. It was during spring break up here is what it was like. And so they were just like, we're just going to have a 2-week spring break instead of one just to make sure things are good. And then it was a month, and then it was just like, we're just going to close down for the rest of the thing. And I was like, whoa, that hit very fast, right?
100 miles per hour.
Yeah. And it's, again, that fluctuating environment,
Definitely.
right? And having to be adaptable. Some people really got stuck inside and kind of
It was hard to adapt.
And isolated past maybe their what was good for them as people, right? And some people are hermits, but then others were, I don't know, use that as a point of like to stay inside, but then that maybe slowed down their progression as a person, I would say, for some people. And so I'm very thankful for what I had during the pandemic, because being more outside or more rural, I'm not in an apartment in a city, so
you don't have to close yourself off as much.
Yeah. And I found a job and was able to work for that place easily.
In person or remote?
Yeah, in person. Because it was a ranch that was remote, and so it was all, we didn't really worry about cases at all and stuff like that. And I was able to work a lot and just kind of do that while the whole thing was riding out. And then I had semester at school and online classes, but eventually that was lifted and stuff like that. So I had a probably relatively easier time with it, which I'm very thankful for. Learned a lot, but I also just have a more optimistic tact towards things, So
same.
I think it's also like thankful for my circumstance, but then also thankful for just the mindset I think I take to things. But yeah.
I mean, I think there's positives to this whole thing as well, and that is, jobs. They used to be, you either work in person or you don't have the job.
Yeah.
Now they have so many more options with being remote, and like for example, my cousin has a job in Denver, works remotely, moving to Austin, Texas, and can still keep the same job. So I think it's a lot more accessible for people now, and we're so much more technologically advanced and tech savvy. More people are comfortable in front of computer screens, and which I think is a valid way of
Yeah.
kind of thinking of the positive rather
Mhm.
than the negative of
Yeah.
COVID. Because, I mean, it sucked, but
Yeah.
also, we learned a lot from it and are ready for another one,
Yeah.
which is bound to happen.
Yeah, yeah. And
So.
we had the Great Resignation. I
Yeah.
think, optimistically, I look at it as a lot of people had a awakening in a sense and a
Mhm.
self-assessment of like, why am I doing this job? Why am I doing this or that in my life? Like, I gotta reset or pivot
Mhm.
or change fields or anything like that, which I think is healthy to do, right? Especially to be a little pessimistic, I would wish that people would do that without the need of a pandemic,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But at least people still, I think, on
It
a
did
grand scale,
yeah.
learn from
Yeah.
it, right?
Yep, yep.
Which is the optimistic point of view. But to be a little pessimistic, I'm like, do this
They
a little
learned it,
more often on your own, right?
but
Maybe
did
learn
they
from
need a
this and do
pandemic?
it
Yeah.
once a year or something like that. Have an
Exactly.
assessment of
Yeah.
like, what am I doing that I actually really enjoy, that I want to double down on, and things I don't enjoy that I want to subtract from my life, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think people had that thought on a grand scale, and I would like to see maybe a little more of that, right? Of
Yeah.
just more intentionality towards their life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any final thoughts? I'm going to maybe wrap it up here.
I do not know.
Yeah, it was great talking with you,
yeah,
Matt.
Yeah, of course.
On this, in this journal is a question from every person that's been on.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to ask you a question from the last person that was on here.
All right.
And then you can ask your own questions, so just get your gears kind of turning a little bit on that. But previously we had two people sort of on, so I guess I have two questions for you. The first one was, what has been a time in your life that that has changed you not only personally but also your perspective?
Ooh. I mean, COVID's a big one, but also I think just being in college. I think college has changed me greatly. From being this person, not very spontaneous, have to follow a schedule, to go into college, and now I'm spontaneous. If one thing goes wrong, I'm not going to lose my marbles. I'm going to figure out a way to kind of get to the end goal, but a different route. So I've become a little more chill, less in your face.
More fluid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is a good way of living life. Things will go wrong, and you can't get down in the dirt because of that. Just kind of take it as a learning lesson and go from there.
Yeah. Do you personally lean more to liking more structure in your life, or do you like how you're wired personally?
I would say yes, but I have come to enjoy scheduled spontaneity. Like, have a rough structure, but kind of go with the flow and figure out things as they go, because that's more fun.
Yeah.
If you have an itinerary for everything, you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I like some surprise in my life.
I know exactly what you mean by scheduled spontaneity, but what exactly, I'm curious what that exactly looks like for you, because it seems like an oxymoron in a sense, right?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I know
Yeah.
what you mean by it, but could you speak more to the essence of what that is? Or what it means for you personally of what is scheduled but spontaneous for you?
Like, for a 14er trip, I like to schedule it, leave really early at like 11:30 p.m. I'll be waking up, driving to the mountains to hike 10 hours or whatever. So I have a schedule that I would like to follow, but, things happen. It may go quicker, may go slower than you would like. And yeah, like, there's always a schedule I'm following, but if something changes, it's okay with me.
Yeah, almost opening up your day.
Exactly.
To where maybe instead of 10 hours, it takes 11 hours, but I took the long way on the trail or something like that,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's hard to say, because I hate not knowing what I'm going to do with my day. I hate not having an idea of how I'm going to, make my day as productive as possible. But also, things change, and I will pick up, whoever wants to invite me out, or I'll invite somebody out. I'll be quick to make changes to my plans to fit kind of fit the day, fit the vibe.
Yeah, I gotcha. And then second question, very serious. Chickens or ducks?
Chickens or ducks? Oh. Ducks.
Ducks.
I like ducks. They
And then,
quack. They're funny. They're yeah.
All right. If you want to ask a question.
Yeah. Let me think real quick.
be
I was thinking
anything you
about
want.
those, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll
give you some
I want to
time.
do like a controversial, but funny.
Yeah.
I always like to say this one: sock, shoe, shoe, or sock, shoe, shoe.
Oh.
Because my answer to that is kind of, on the less popular side.
Shoe, sock.
No, never heard that one though.
Okay, ask it one more time. I want to.
So, when
wanna hear
you're
it again.
it depends on the situation for me.
Okay.
But when you're waking up in the morning, or if you're putting on socks after wearing like flip-flops or something, is it sock, shoe, or sock, then the shoe, and then
Okay.
the other foot sock,
Okay.
and then the other shoe?
What is yours?
I'm sock, shoe.
What?
I
That is
know,
actually very
it's-
controversial.
I know, yeah. And my answer to that is most of the time, I will already have my socks in the morning. So I would say 90% of the time I will do sock, shoe, because I already have my socks on.
Okay.
However, if I'm in the situation when I need to put on both, I will do sock, shoe, because I've always been, in that situation, up in the mountains or swimming at the beach. You don't want to put both socks on and then have one sock get dirty while you're putting on a shoe. So you have the barefoot, put on the sock, put on the shoe, you're clean, you're set. You take your other foot, you wipe it off with that shoe,
Yeah.
put the sock on, put the shoe on.
Okay.
So it's in a very specific situation, but I would say 90% of the
Yeah.
time I do that.
Yeah.
Because I'm in those situations.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for the question.
Of course.
Is there anything you would like to promote real quick? Either your own personal social media or anything's going on right now in the world, or
Not necessarily. If you guys do want to follow my photography account, it'd be really helpful. On Instagram, it's at Matt_ography24.
Okay.
It's all my 14er hikes I do, wildlife, animals. I post stuff about conservation or weather, just cool nature stuff on there if you like that. So, yeah.
I'll
Highly
link it in the
recommend.
description of this video too.
Cool.
for
Appreciate
ya.
it.
But yeah, it was good having you on, Matt.
Yeah,
Thanks for
absolutely.
coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It was cool to be here.